All right, everybody, welcome back to Think Mindset Live with Randy and I. We're looking forward to sitting down and talking to Mohnish Soundararajan, who is going to enlighten us today on many fronts. He's the author of How to Take Notes at the Speed of Light and the founder of a company called Signature. They are a production studio for authors and entrepreneurs who need help positioning their platform and crafting their best work from copywriting to design. Mohnish, it's great to be with you. I know you're in Portland, Oregon, so I speak for Randy and I. You know, our thoughts, our prayers, our love are with you and everybody who's affected by the tragicness that is going on. So I couldn't start out without saying that. But I want to dive into the art of the word. Right? It is so powerful. And I wrote a book a couple of years ago, and people always ask me, how do you write a book? And my answer is always the following: you have a great editor. And they'll say, well, I can't write. And you don't have to be able to write a book. You just need a good copywriter and an editor and somebody who understands the art of the word. I think today more than ever, we're in the business of getting people's attention. Copywriting is so critical. I'm glad to have you on the show today. Let's start there and talk about just the power and the art of a word.
Yeah, totally. So so with copywriting, right? Essentially, if you just break it down, it's just a series of words that's put into a series of sentences, and then those sentences have a very specific emotional effect. I'm sure you guys have this experience, but where you just go on a web page, you go on a sales page, and you see a series of words, and for some reason, it's kind of a mystery, right? But for some reason, those words have a very specific emotional effect. So really, copyright. I mean, so this applies to all writing, but especially with copywriting, in this sort of context, sort of the magic is when you're able to sort of put words in a way where you have a specific emotional effect that sort of aligns with your own strategy, your goals, what you're trying to go after. And so that's kind of the key. There's a lot of ways to do that. There's a lot of ways sort of skin that cat. But essentially, I think, I'm sure you guys feel this way. I read probably too many books. You know, I love the things that people put out, and I think writing is clearly it's a skill that I love, but it's also a skill that I think has the power to really just move people. It moves people to act. It moves people to think more clearly about the world. It moves people to actually sort of get things that they wouldn't normally otherwise, right? So, for example, I think the obvious example with an online course, right? You're trying to sell your online course, but I've bought books, online courses that I would not have bought if the copy wasn't good,
right?
And those have changed the quality of my life. Right. Those have actually had a specific differential in how I view my life, how I think about my life, the things that I do in my life. And to be frank, I think there's a lot of sort of talk, and I think well-intentioned and well-reasoned talk about sort of how copywriting can be a force for quote unquote evil. But I also think that for the most part, if you're sort of backing quality books, quality products, things that can actually help people, I think what you're doing is something that needs to be done. And so I think it's extremely critical. And I think it's something that I think persuasion and the persuasion and using persuasion within the written word is extremely important, because it sells people on things that they wouldn't have been sold on otherwise. So.
Yeah, it reminds me, Mohnish, as you were talking about copywriting, products, services. I think of that movie, and it escapes me now, but one of the lead actors was Greg Kinnear. He had invented the Ford Motor windshield wiper, and he was on stand, and they talked about, what gives you the right to think you copyrighted something that Ford had already invented. And they cross-examined the Ford representative and basically said, here are words, and I think it was a Dickens book, saying these are words, but these are his words. This is his product, right? So the idea was, you can have copyright. You can have something that people can absolutely find utility with. And that's going to move them. So my question to you is, you talk about books that move you, and we can all agree there's always been that book that really resonated with us. But with all of the books that are out there and all the books that we read and all the articles and blogs and things that we see, what is that driving force where you can say, yes, that's the one that really has me going? Because you mentioned you read so many books and they've moved you and they've reshaped and defined you, but there are some that simply don't resonate. But how do you get from start to finish?
Yeah. That's a hard question, but I'm going to poke at it, see what happens. So your question sort of parsing, like, why when I read a book, right? Why is it good? Like, why do I sort of? I think there's sort of two fronts, and this is sort of a pet theory of mine, but the two fronts here is that there is sort of an intellectual level that it hits you at, and there's sort of an emotional level, right? An intuitive level, sort of an experiential level that it hits you at. So, for example, I'm sure you guys have read maybe a dense scientific book. I have dense scientific books that are just sort of, but they're so goddamn boring, right? So they don't hit. So here, the thing is that intellectually, right, the actual reasoning that they go through, the actual points that they're making about the nature of reality, like those things are actually all good, right? But the actual presentation, the way the argument is structured, the storytelling, the narrative arc, for whatever reason, when you put them all together, right, it doesn't hit you experientially. You don't feel anything. You're just kind of like, this is great, but this is very boring. And I was reading some. I wish it wasn't this way, to be honest. But I was reading some tweet, and basically it was something to the effect of, it's not the person with the truth that wins; it's the person with the best story, right? And essentially, the idea here is that if you want, I think at least when I'm reading books, the things that move me the most, right, are always things that have sort of a solid intellectual foundation. What they're saying lines up with reality. When they're saying something, I'm like, there's a truth to it, right? Yeah. So that they hit it on that front. But also they're able to sort of emotionally and experientially move you, right? So you're reading it and you feel like you're moved, right? When you go to the movies, we don't just kind of go to the movies to sort of get a lecture, right? We go to the movies to sort of feel a very specific emotion. And so when you feel like the book has done both, I get this sort of general sense, right? It's more of a general intuition. Oh, that's a really good book. That moves me to talk about the book. That moves me to sort of recommend. I have a reading newsletter on my website that sort of makes me want to just yammer and talk about the book too much. And so, yeah, I think that's sort of how I view that question.
I'm gonna take a stab at that question too, because when it comes to Randy, that question, I think there's certain books that you just have kind of an electrical magnet, like pull to, right? And I think for me, it's the ones that have a simple. I agree with you, intellectual yet simple rhythm to the books. I think when it comes to the word and design, Mohnish, like you do, it's kind of like the words and the rhythm that are in alignment with my frequency, my vibration of where I am and where I actually want to be and where I want to evolve and grow to, that I think are so important. And so my question to you is, when you're taking now the written word, right, and you're looking at all the senses, right? So you got people who are visual, some percentage of visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, and then you take the word and you overlay it with design, right? So what is that? What's the ideal marriage of that?
Yeah. So what's the? So I think the book. If I had to sort of venture a guess at that question, I think the book is a lovely marriage of those two mediums. The book, when you have a book,
your book or any book,
any book that's sort of well written and whatever.
Your book too, Mohnish, don't worry.
Any book. I feel like that. The thing is that I was reading. I think I was. It's a couple of years ago. I was reading some research on what makes people buy books, right? And what's interesting is that I think intellectually in our own heads, when we're buying a book, we feel like rational agents, right? We feel like we're making a decision based on rational principles, that we are buying the book because we need this book. And right, we sort of convince ourselves that we're buying this book. And there's wonderful research actually from Jonathan Haidt, and also that you can find sort of in the mental modular theory of the brain, where basically the idea here is that emotions come first and then reasoning comes in post, so afterwards. And when you sort of pay attention to sort of the contents of your experience, I've noticed when I'm purchasing a book, what happens is, it's not that I see the book, I read the copy, and then I make some wonderful, smart argument. Oh, I'm going to buy this book. This is great. It's more that I see the front cover, right? It inspires a very subtle emotion, right? Maybe it's craving, it's desire, it's something, right? And then I read the copy, that inspires another sort of emotion.
Yeah.
And then I read the reviews. There's that's sort of social proof. It's almost like I'm persuading myself based on the feelings that I already had prior to me thinking about the book. And so I think when people are creating art and work, right, I think the logical part of creating or designing something is lovely. I think it's something you absolutely must pay attention to. I think it's critical. But I also think that experiential and intuitive side is extremely important. And you see this in book design. I mean, at least for me, I don't know if this sort of, I feel like this experience definitely extrapolates to other people, but it might not extrapolate. I know it extrapolates less to other people than other people. But basically, when I'm reading a book, or when I'm purchasing one or whatever, the cover really does inform how I feel about the book, right? It informs whether I feel like it's professionally made, it's unprofessionally, it's almost its own social proof in a way that makes me believe and persuade me into the message, even though logically the argument should only rest on the text itself. So yeah, I think design is obviously very important. So
yeah. So how does, in terms of the ever changing landscape of technology, I mean, we all grew up with books. Now, Jonathan and I are probably older than you. So,
probably.
Yeah. It was always hardcover. Maybe if you're lucky, paperback.
Yeah.
Whatever made the book, your backpack a little lighter. But in the technology age, how do you stand out? Podcasts, blogs, text messages, social media. How do Mohnish? How does Mohnish pivot in order to allow that customer, or let's say any person, to stand out? So we get that resonance, that magnetism. How do we get that in people?
So I'll speak from, I can speak from this in a more macro way. I think that there is this idea. Sort of Peter Mendelsohn, who's a lovely designer, he talks about this a little bit, but it's basically this idea, this marketing methodology where the way that you market and the way that you create is by copying other people. Now, I totally think that you should absolutely, if you see, for example, let's say you're making a movie, right? Just in case you guys want to in case Randy wants to make a movie one day, right? Let's say you're making a movie and you watch other movies, you're inspired, you pull inspiration from them, you sort of take those principles that you really love and you sort of infuse it in your own. I think that's great, right? But there is sort of this other sort of that sort of extreme version of that, right? Where you're sort of this marketing methodology where you're literally copying and pasting things that other people have done. Now, I think, again, in specific context, I think that it can be very useful, right? If someone else is doing something successful and, it works for you, that's great, right? But I also think that part of what makes work stand out is the fact that there is a clear differential from that work to everything else, right? The fact, if something stands out, by definition of standing out, it must be different than everything else. And part of that, I've worked with clients. I mean, it's tough. People they want to stand out, but they don't really want to stand out, right? I mean, it doesn't mean having a crazy cover that everyone's like, what the hell is that? But it does mean, in a sense, being artistically brave enough to do something that looks different, that feels different, that might make an argument, that might make some people not exactly happy. But again, doing it in good faith and doing it in a way where you can make something it's truly different. And I think part of that, it's definitely one part's courage, right? You need a sense of artistic and intellectual courage to be able to put something out that stands out from everybody else, and to sort of really deliberately do that on purpose, right? It's not just sort of a thing that happens accidentally. Most people by default copy other people. Like when they're writing, they write stuff that feels and even tonally. I mean, when I have writing on my website where I'm very much, I can tell the author influences that are sort of guiding what I'm writing like, right? Everyone has done this, right? But I think part of making work that stands out is being an individual, thinking independently for yourself, reasoning from first principles, and making work that when people see it, they have sort of, again, an experiential, intuitive reaction, like, oh shit, I can't, they won't say this to themselves, but they'll feel it. Like, I can't, that's a one of a kind, right? So,
it's interesting what you're talking about when it comes to courage and just stepping out of your comfort zone. And, it goes back to what you were talking about earlier. Everybody has a story. Everybody has a lesson to teach. I think where the courage sets in is a lot of times our gifts that we have to teach are the same as far as the struggles that we had to get through. Mm-hmm. And so, it takes courage to talk about the struggles to talk then that led to the gifts, right? Mm-hmm. So I have a question for you about your book, right? How to take notes at the speed of light, right?
Totally. Yeah.
I'm able to type notes at the speed of light because my dad told me if you pay attention in high school and one class only, it was typing. It was mandatory. I'm 48. Mm-hmm. Mandatory to take Randy and Mohnish on a typewriter. Mrs. Conway was our teacher. And 2 semesters of typing, he said, pay attention, it will serve you well. And taking notes has served me really well. So, how do you, what's the book about? And how do you take notes at the speed of light? Because that's pretty fast.
Yeah. So just if someone's listening, you actually literally can't take notes at the speed of light. That's physically impossible. But if you want, the book, the sort of the idea that I sort of posit in the book, and technically I kind of don't say this in the book clearly, but I'll sort of talk about it from the first principle here. I think taking notes doesn't matter. I think it doesn't matter in a very visceral sense. I think what matters is that what you're reading, what you're consuming, the online courses you take, everything that years, right? It's years of people reading books, putting them down, taking online courses, podcasts, videos, YouTube, masterclasses, right? It's years of this, right? And they don't use it, right? They don't use it in the specific ways they want to use it. They don't use it in the sort of idiosyncratic context that they want to be using it in. If they have projects, they don't utilize the ideas that they've come across. And the problem here is, again, it is with taking notes, but taking notes, again, it's only a vehicle to get from A to B, right? And so I kind of noticed that some of the note-taking strategies, I think they're well-intentioned. I think they are well-reasoned note-taking strategies online. In fact, if you type in note-taking methods and you try another note-taking method, 2 things. 1, how dare you? And then number 2, I think that they're actually pretty smart. But the thing is that they're very aligned with sort of the practitioner, right? It might be a biographer. It might be someone who is, a CEO is extremely busy, right? It doesn't really matter who the person is. I think the point of the book is it gives you sort of a foundational system. And so there's that part to it. But really is that you don't have to take notes in the way that everybody else is saying to take notes. You have to take notes in a way that fits your context, that fits your energy levels, that fits who you are, that sort of is aligned so that you don't, everyone's had the experience where you try this note-taking system and you're just like, this is too much work. I feel like it's a part-time job. I want to like run into a brick wall. It's just like, there's so many times when I've been taking notes on books and I've been trying out a method, and it just felt like it didn't make sense for my life, what I was doing. And this book is really trying to get people to sort of just sort of turn back the clock a little bit and sort of think again from first principles and think, okay, instead of just trying out a million note-taking systems, what do I need? What matters to me, right? And so, yeah, that's sort of the basic idea underpinning the book. So
now, I didn't read the book, but
yeah.
our podcast is mindset. So I want to extrapolate and play with it, or as you say, let's poke it a little bit.
Yeah, totally.
My question is geared toward not note taking in the physical sense, but mental note taking, judgments, perception, our reality as we come into contact with people, in the business and non-business environment. How can we improve the way we see people and the way people see us? I know in one of your columns, which I thought it was fascinating, the way you talk about signaling, the way you talk about people's perception of you, whether it's cologne, whether it's a bandana around your neck, whatever it might be. What is that it factor? What is that je ne sais quoi, as they say? How can you stand out? And how can you pay attention to what others might have to further your mindset and get you to profit, get you in the black? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so is your question more about mental note-taking on reading or more about signaling theory?
Yeah, more signaling theory, just
got it.
In the overall outside, in the environment, the business environment.
Totally. Yeah, I actually when I was so I've been working with authors since I was 17. So it was kind of I was in high school, right? It was very weird. It was like I would I would go to high school and then it was just very weird. I don't know what to tell you. I would tell friends and be like, wait, what? I don't understand what you're doing. So I think with that, when I was in high school, I was just a kid and I was not exactly professional, right? I didn't really act professionally. And when I mean professional, I mean I was a little too informal, right? So I was acting professional in the sense of like, I was sort of, I would get the work done. We would be working. It was a good relationship, but just in the way that I talked, right? I was like a high schooler, right? Which I was a high schooler at the time. And so what was interesting was I remember in one specific instance, I won't sort of name names, but that was actually a reason why I couldn't move forward in a specific position that I had, was because, I just came off as this young guy. Right. I just came off as I was a little too young, and I didn't. And again, the clients that we were sort of working with they were in their 40s or 30s, and basically the idea was, you want to instill confidence, and you don't want to just be like, hey, here's this random 17-year-old guy that you never met before. Here, he's going to handle everything. Like it's just kind of like, all right. And so I think what's interesting about that, right, is that technically, right. Right, technically. So that actually shouldn't have been a problem, right? The fact that I acted like, I just talked like a 17. I'd be like, dude, what's going on? Like the kind of like a little bit like that. The fact that I sort of talked like that shouldn't have been a problem because I was doing the work done. It was sort of a high integrity relationship. It was great, right? But for whatever reason, right, the way that I talked, right, sort of the high schooler version of me, right? It wasn't signaling the right things, right? And it was funny because it wasn't even like at the time. It wasn't even to me. It was just like, oh yeah, every now and then it was just a little informal and it was whatever. But me being 17, me being a little bit too young, me whatever, they all signaled very specific things, whether or not I wanted to or not, right? And I think that kind of the reality, and this is it's you can both use it to your advantage, but it can also be a little sad, is that people judge you. You judge people all the time. You're lying to yourself if you don't say that. You judge it. You basically, your mind is processing thousands and thousands and thousands of bits of information, some unconscious, some conscious, And from that, from the aggregate, you're getting you're coming out with a very specific impression. The watch you're wearing, the clothes you're wearing, the way your hair is styled, the way your beard looks, everything, right? And this even, really everything, the way you talk, the way you enunciate your words, the sort of points you put, the humor, everything, right, gives out a very, and there's a very clear evolutionary reason for this, right? We evolved to sort of figure out the truth from the signals that we're getting, right? And so you have to, at least for me, I realized that while I think that there was a youthful vitality, there's sort of youthfulness that I think many people would be wise to sort of keep in. I also realized that I could be both, right? I could sort of juggle both signals where, again, it was, I might have came off as a kid. I could also sort of come off as someone who was a professional, and I could do both at the same time. And so being very conscious of your signals, being very conscious of how you're signaling, I think it seems superficial. And in a way it is, right? But it's also, I think, relevant because it actually, it actually changes the way that people view you. And in turn, it changes sort of the opportunities that you may or may not get. So,
yeah. Mohnish, you're an interesting guy, and I speak on behalf of Randy and I. We wish you all the best with your book. Yeah. We have a 45-second speed round. You ready?
I don't know, but let's go.
These are quick answers. Ready?
Got it.
Mine is your book. Favorite book and why?
Oh, Jesus. Favorite book that I've read recently, I don't know if I can be favorite book, but Transcend by Scott Barry Kaufman. It was just phenomenal. So.
All right.
Okay. Favorite social media platform?
None of them. I am not too big on social media. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. Good. Bold statement. Bold. All right.
Bold.
I want to know your mindset, right? There's so much stuff going on in the world right now. What's your mindset to get back to center?
Say that one more time.
There's so much going on in the world right now.
Mm-hmm.
What's your mindset to get back to center?
What's my mindset to get back to center? I think the meditative mindset. I have been meditating for years now. It's truly changed my life. So
me too.
Yeah.
Me too. 25 years.
Yeah. Oh my God, 25 years. That is so long. I am 25.
Right. If I had more hair, you would think I was younger. Let's not go.
Yeah.
Let's not. I mean, 20's like what? Right. Okay. Randy, last question.
Yeah. John, you're signaling quite well with a lot. Yeah. No. Mohnish is very enlightening. I mean, for 25 years of age, the rich history you've already have and the wisdom that you bring is beyond your years. And I don't say that condescendingly. I mean, it's very impressive.
Thank you.
It's you're definitely someone we would talk to again.
Yeah.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
You have a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
You have a lot
of knowledge. Yeah. You got a lot of wisdom and knowledge in you. Tell everybody where they can get a hold of you, buy your book, all that other great stuff.
Totally. Yeah. So the best place is www.mohnish.net. .net, yeah, just that. www.mohnish.net. So Mohnish, if you don't know how to spell it, most people don't. It's MOHNISH.net. And you can actually, so the note-taking book we talked about, you can get the entire system for free if you go there. So the actual system in the book, you can get it without paying for it. And also have a reading list, right? So if you're interested in just sort of, for me, just a quick thing, I think when you read a lot of books, I think when you read the right books, they can really change the quality of your life. They can change how you view the world, and they can make the world feel more beautiful. And I think that's sort of the aim with the reading list. And there's also movies and all this stuff. So that's pretty much that. So
I love it. Yeah, I love what you're talking about. The beauty of the beauty within the word, the beauty within everything that you're talking about, and we all need that lens right now, and that reminder of that lens to find the beauty of things right now when there's a lot of just sad things in the world right now. So, of
course,
Mohnish, I can't thank you enough for being on the show. Continued safety to you and everybody.
Yeah.
where you are. I appreciate your insight and your wisdom. And Randy, always fun. I'll let you kind of close it out, Randy.
Mohnish, thank you. I really enjoyed this segment. 30 minutes is clearly not enough with you. And using a baseball metaphor, right field, left field, you took it right back to center. So thank you. Hopefully we'll get to see you again, and please stay safe.
Of course. Thank you. I had so much fun. This is cool.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks you both. Thanks, Randy. Thanks,